Also, you've probably noticed that everyone is muted, and that is just to reduce the background noise and allow everyone to hear the presentation. In the upper right corner of your WebEx training window, there is a Q&A button, so you can submit questions there. It doesn't work exactly like a chat, so we won't be able to see everyone's questions, but when I'm answering, I'll read the question as they come in so that everyone is familiar with what I'm answering. All right, well, I have 2 minutes after, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, good morning. My name is Kelly Nestor, and I'll be taking you through the class this morning on Access Online User Profile Setup and Maintenance. So our learning objectives for this session, we want to talk a little bit about differentiating between the setup of user profiles and card accounts, because those two things can be easy to mix up, especially if you're new to the system. We'll talk about how to set up and maintain and remove user profiles. We'll talk about points of contact as well, and user profile reports, and additional training resources. So first, let's talk about differentiating between card accounts and user profile setup. You'll have classes on both. Today we're focusing on setting up user profiles. So let's just talk a little bit about the difference between. So when we're talking about setting up and maintaining a card account, we're talking about setting up that account, requesting that the card be sent, and that account is, of course, based on the 16-digit account number that you'll use to make business purchases. It can be a plastic card. It can also be virtual as well, depending on your setup. And when we talk about setting up an account, we're talking about specifically the card account. Now, in contrast, when we're talking about setting up a system user, that is when we are going in to create a user ID so that someone can log in and complete tasks in Access Online based on their role in the card program. A user profile is typically separate from an account, and they are set up differently. However, it is possible to link the two, so we'll be talking about that a little bit further in the presentation. But for now, just know that typically you are either setting up a system user, which would be like a backup administrator or a manager or an approver of some type, or you'll be setting up a card account for cardholders. You typically won't be doing both. And that should become a little bit more clear the further we get into it. So let's talk about how to set up a user profile. So you would go to your system administration from the home page, and under system administration, you would go directly to user profiles, which is on the top left of that main page there. And when you click on the user profiles link, you're going to have two options. One is to click this link here at the top of the screen to set up a new user, or you can search for an existing user to update or maintain. So we're going to start with setting up a new user. When you start to set up a new user, you're going to see a screen that looks like this. Basically, you will enter the user name, their email address, their user ID, and then you'll have a checkbox here for the data exchange. In case you were not on yesterday, the data exchange is kind of the mailbox, quote unquote, for Access Online, where you can view your scheduled reports, or you can upload or download files to and from the bank, such as a bulk account setup request or something like that. So if this user, which is again typically going to be another administrator, maybe a finance person for reporting, or a manager approver, if they're going to need access to scheduled reports and things of that nature, then you would want to check this box to allow them access to that data exchange. Then you're going to enter a password. Now, this password is a one-time use kind of general password. You can use it for everyone because when the user logs in for the first time using this password that you're going to give them, they will be asked to set their own personal password. And this password is not real easily reset. I'm going to give you the one that I usually use here on the screen. One second. And the character limits are pretty extensive. So here's an example of one that you can use if you like. The capital letter, it's got the numeric, it's got the special character, and it's 12 characters. So you can make up one that is easy to remember, or you can use this one and you will enter it here. Okay, Chloe has a question. Cardholders will be able to set up their own user profiles, correct? And yes, Chloe, you are correct. We're going to look at how that happens in just a minute. So you'll enter that password, and then if you want the system to send those credentials to the new user so that you don't have to send them yourself in a separate email, you can check that box there that says email login credentials to the user. And then scrolling further down the screen, you have some additional options. If this person is going to be a manager or approver, and they'll be approving transactions, if that is part of your process, you will need to set them up here as an approval manager so that they'll have access to that manager approval queue. You can choose either approval or final approval, depending on what your process looks like. And if you have the final approval manager selected here, you can also define a limit. So let's say that you have maybe a middle level approver and they can approve everything up to like $5,000, and then beyond that there has to be another level of approval. You can set that limit here. Or if that person is the final approval manager for any amount, then you can leave it set at no limit. Okay, let's see. Brenda says the previous screen showed a time limit for no actions. Can we change that? Okay, she's talking about this bottom here where it says number of days inactive. That, I believe, is something that can be set at the organization level. So if you look at your own system, and I probably should have mentioned this before, my apologies, the screenshots that I'm showing you are from our demo system that we use for training purposes, and there will be some differences in what you're seeing on my screen versus what your own system looks like. So I would recommend going to this page and looking at setting up a new user. You don't even have to enter anything, but on the form it will show you the number of days that have been set for your organization. So you can't change it personally on your level, but it is dictated by organization, and it is typically user longer than 90 days. That's kind of the minimum. So take a look at that. You're welcome. So back to approvals. You can also set up a default approver for this user. So let's say that this person is not the final approver. You can select an approver here for all of this person's approvals to go to as a next step. You can also select a backup approver, and if you're selecting backup, you can also select a time frame for that, such as if the person is going to be out on a leave of absence or working on an alternate job assignment or something, you can set dates for that backup. Now, depending on how you're going to be using transaction approvals, there are some tips here. I'm not going to go through all of these because it gets quite detailed, but you will have this page as part of your deck, and there are some notes in the PowerPoint that expand on these tips a little bit. And I think this will make more sense when you go through the transaction management class, which I believe is tomorrow. So you can revisit this information at that time. Scrolling down the page further, below the approval options, you have an option here for selecting the functional entitlement group. Now, functional entitlement group is just a fancy name for saying what are the permissions or privileges that this user is going to have in the system. So if you're following along in your own system, you'll see that these are just example ones, and the functional entitlement groups that you will see will be more specific to your organization. You'll see some commonalities like the full or maybe a read-only or view-only. This one means cardholder, program administrator finance means that it's just view-only for reporting purposes, things like that. But you'll have functional entitlement groups that are relevant to your organization. And you can see up top here that no group has been selected yet. You can use the checkbox here to select the group that applies to this user. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know which functional entitlement group to select? Well, there's three main categories of functional entitlements: cardholders, approvers or managers, and then administrators. And to be able to see what is involved in the functional entitlement groups, you can actually click on the link here of the functional entitlement group name, and it will take you to a page that looks like this. And in these little brackets here are plus and minus signs, so you can expand or collapse, kind of like your file explorer. And then you'll see check marks indicated next to all of the functions that are included in that functional entitlement group. Another thing that you can do is talk with your implementation contact or your account coordinator if you're still unsure about which functional entitlement group will apply to the user that you're setting up. So once you've selected the checkbox here, then you'll see your functional entitlement group will be populated up top. And the very last option on this page of setting up our user profile, step one, basically, is accounting code view. Now, I am not sure if Colorado is going to be using accounting code views, so that is something that should be communicated to you as part of the implementation process. But just an example of how this can be used, view 1 is the smallest scope of visibility of the accounting code structure. So this would typically be maybe for a cardholder that just needs to see only their own account. And then view 2 might be a broader scope of view, say for a manager or an approver who needs to see a group of cardholders or all the accounts in a specific part of the hierarchy. And then accounting code 3 would be maybe the administrator level view where it shows all of the accounting code segments or the widest scope. So again, you may or may not be using this. I've not been privy to that information yet, unfortunately. But if you're not hearing anything about accounting code view, then chances are it is not being used, and you can just leave it set at 3, which is the default. Now, once you've gotten to the bottom of this page, you're going to hit save. And then step 1 of setting up your user is complete. And you'll see a success message here at the top, and you'll see the basic information here that you just entered for that user. Now, if you were to stop here and not do anything else, your user would not be fully set up. And that is because, yes, we've given them some functional entitlements, we've given them a login, but they do not have any accounts or hierarchies to work with yet. So they can't really do much in the system because they can't see any of your accounts or hierarchies. So if you scroll further down this page, then you'll see that's our next step, which is step 2, which is to assign either accounts or hierarchies. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know which of those to assign? So let's talk about that for just a moment. When you're looking to assign an account, the reason or the instance when that would be appropriate would be if this user just needs to work with one or just a few specific accounts that are maybe in different parts of the hierarchy. Let's say that you have somebody from your maintenance department and someone from your IT department, and those are the only two accounts that this user needs to work with. So it would make sense to just assign those specific accounts to this user so that they have that access. Also, sometimes approvers can be assigned specific accounts, and this account assignment is typically for the cardholders. And actually, when the cardholders set up their own user profile by registering their card, they are assigned their own account as part of that process. Now, it would make sense to assign a hierarchy when the user needs to work with more accounts, maybe multiple accounts in a specific part of the hierarchy, or to have the view and access to all the accounts in a particular part of the hierarchy. This is typically for approvers or managers or for program administrators. So again, if you're going to assign an account, it might be for one specific account. Perhaps, let's say that there's someone who is perhaps a director, and that person has an administrative assistant, and that administrative assistant is going to handle the expense process here in Access Online. So you could set up a user profile for that administrative assistant and then assign that executive or director's account to the assistant's user profile so that they can work with that account. So to add an account, you can click the edit link there, and you'll see a page here. If you know the account number, you can enter it here and click add, or you can use this link to do an account search. And then you'll be able to pick the account to add from a list of your cardholders. And then once the account has been added, you'll see it here in this table below. And you'll always want to look for that Save button, of course. And then here's what that table looks like once the account has been added. Now, if you are instead going to assign a hierarchy, which again is appropriate for a larger number of accounts, or viewing all the accounts in a particular part of the hierarchy, such as for a manager, approver, or administrator, then you have these links here. Now, there's two of them, reporting hierarchy and processing hierarchy. So you're probably wondering which of these to assign. With the processing hierarchy, that is basically the part of Access Online that relates to things like billing and allocations of accounting codes to purchases. And the reporting hierarchy is related to the transaction approval process and to kind of audit or compliance type functionalities. So if you're unsure, it's a good idea to assign both of these. You may have been told by your Next Level Up or by your contact at the bank to set up one or the other. Follow that guidance if you've been given it, but in the absence of that guidance, I would recommend setting them both up. Okay, we have a question from Wendy. I need to set up an approving manager for several accounts. She will also have her own card. Will she need 2 separate logins? That is a great question, Wendy, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. Excuse me. So let's continue on with adding our hierarchy here, and then we'll get to Wendy's question shortly. So both of these links work the same way. We're just going to show you an example using the processing hierarchy link, but keep in mind if you've not been directed specifically about one or the other to add, then it is a good idea to add them both just to make sure all your bases are covered. All right, so when you click the View or Add Processing Hierarchy link, you'll see a search page. Now, the hierarchy level goes from 1 to 5. Level 1 is the highest, which would show you all of the hierarchies that are in your area of responsibility. Level 5 is typically your managing account level. That would be kind of the one level roll up from the cardholder level. So it defaults to level 5 because typically if you're assigning a hierarchy for someone, you know, it would be based on the managing account level, but that does vary based on how you're being set up in Access Online. So you can change this level if you like, or you can leave it set to level 5. If you know the reporting hierarchy name or processing hierarchy name, or you know the numbers associated with that hierarchy, you can enter them. Chances are you are not going to know that information, at least early on, so you can leave it blank and just click your search. Here's what the search results look like. So you'll see a list of all the hierarchies here, and I realize this screen is kind of an eye chart. You do have at the bottom left of your screen the ability to zoom in, so feel free to do that if the screenshot is a little bit small on your view. Now you'll see these numbers, agent and company, these relate to the bank's structure. They're not going to mean anything to you, at least at the beginning. So we do have a show or hide all hierarchy names link that is right here at the top of the hierarchy results list. And when you click that link, you'll see the labels of the accounting code segments that are part of your terminology within your organization so that you'll know which hierarchy to select. And to select a hierarchy, you'll click your checkbox here, and then in the middle of the page, you'll click the Select Position button, and that will bring your checkboxed hierarchy over here to the right side as a selected position. And then once you've selected your hierarchy, it's very important to remember at the bottom of the screen to click your Accept Hierarchy button to save that selection. Once you've clicked Accept Hierarchy, you'll be brought back to the user profile page, and you won't see the hierarchies that are selected the same way that you'll see the accounts on that little table, but this link does say View and Add, so if you were to click this link again, you would go directly back to the screen so that you can view the selected hierarchy or change it. And we'll talk about how to change it when we get into maintaining user profiles. So again, we do recommend that you repeat the process with the reporting hierarchy unless you've been given specific direction about which of these hierarchies to choose. Okay, Michelle asks, is this for our state administrator or will the department administrators use this as well? Michelle, that is a great question. I'm not sure that I can answer that because it's a procedural question. So that might be a question for your next level up. That's not something that I have knowledge of. My apologies, I cannot answer that. Basically, my training is to tell you about how the system works. Anything specific to your process within the state of Colorado, I wouldn't necessarily know. So Michelle says, I'll email the state administrator. Okay, great, thank you. Now, once you have assigned your accounts and or hierarchies, you've completed basically step 2 of setting up your user, and then there's one last thing to do, which is to enter their contact information. So you'll have your edit link here next to contact information. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped something. Before we go to contact information, let me talk for a moment about setting up proxies. So we don't have a formal functionality for proxy in Access Online, but we do have a way to set it up for you. So remember before I was talking about you could add an account for maybe a director to an administrative assistant's user profile so that they can work with that account. So that's one way if you're talking about card account functionality. But if you're talking about someone being a backup or a proxy for approval or reporting or other types of functions, basically what you could do, let's say that in addition to working with the cardholder information for that director, that this administrative assistant is also going to be doing their approvals and whatnot. So what you would do is you would look at the functional entitlement group for that director and assign the same one to this administrative assistant. And then you would also need to make sure that the same accounts and hierarchies are assigned. And if that is the case, then that user, the administrative assistant, if they have the same settings as the original user, which is that director, then they will be able to perform those functionalities. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so again, step 3 is our contact information. And when you click that link, you'll see the user profile address here. Users can adjust this information or update it by going into the My Personal Information link on the home page. But initially, at least when you're setting up the user, you do need to put in their contact information. You'll have the option to add email notification options here as well, and you can select those for the user if you like, or you can just enter their address and then they can set their own email notification options under My Personal Information once they log in. Okay, so now to kind of a precursor of Wendy's question and talking about Chloe's question at the beginning. You may be wondering about if you need to set up user profiles for cardholders, and the good news is that you do not. So what will happen is the cardholders have a self-registration process. They'll need the organization short name, and then they'll need their card. And when they get to this login page, they can click the Register Online link. This will allow them to enter the organization short name and their account number and their expiration date. And then they'll see a button to send an authorization code for security purposes. And when they enter that code, then they will see the licensing agreement, and they can accept that. It's just the standard, legal terminology. They'll be asked to create their own user ID and password. Now, this will be their personal password that they're setting up themselves, so they wouldn't want to use that one-time use password that you'll be using if you're setting up the user. So they'll create their own. Then they'll be asked to select and answer their authentication questions. They'll be asked to enter their contact information. And this is where, if you were on yesterday, we were talking a little bit about My Personal Information and the user profile. And sometimes, if it is a cardholder, they may have two different addresses here. So the cardholder, when they're registering online, they're asked to enter their contact information. So if they are entering a different address other than the address that was used when their card account was set up, then they may see two different addresses, and it will show them both on that user profile. But the cardholders need to keep in mind that they will need to know the address information that was used when their card account was set up if it is different than what they're entering themselves, because that's how customer service validates them when they call in for help. And if they're paying for fuel at the pump, for instance, and it asks for your zip code, the card account address is what it's looking for. So if you have an opportunity to advise your cardholders to use that same card account address when they're self-registering, that might simplify the process a little bit. Once they have entered their contact information and they click continue, then they'll be brought to the cardholder homepage, and their user profile setup is complete. So they are automatically given that cardholder functional entitlement group when they're doing their own self-registration to set up their own user profile. And now to Wendy's question, do approvers or program administrators who have a card need multiple user IDs and passwords? Our recommendation is that you do keep those logins separate to support the separation of duties. So basically, if an administrator or an approver gets a card, then they can do that cardholder registration process that I just showed you and set up a separate user ID and password to go in and work with their account. and then they would use their existing user profile for their administrator or approver duties. However, it is possible using that account assignment process that I showed you when we were setting up the user, it is possible to go ahead and assign those accounts to an existing user profile. And you totally have the option to do that. So that might be a procedural question that you all need to clarify within your organization. Again, we do recommend that you keep them separate, but it is possible to combine the two. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pause for a minute or so and see what additional questions there might be about setting up user profiles. So feel free again to click the Q&A button at the top right corner above the participant list and above your name, and then you can enter your questions within the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer those. Okay, I don't see any additional questions coming in, so we're going to keep going. Again, feel free to put questions in the Q&A at any point. I'll be glad to answer those. Now let's talk about how to maintain an existing user profile. So again, you would go to System Administration here on your home page, and you would go to User Profiles within System Administration, and then you'll be back on this same page. So instead of clicking the link to set up a new user, we're actually going to search for an existing user to maintain or update. The most popular way to find your user, is by entering their last name, and it'll either bring up their user profile if they have a unique last name, or it'll bring up a list of users with that same last name, and then you can select them from the list. If you wanted to see a list of all your users, you can enter a % here in the user last name field, and it's a wildcard search. Depending on how many users you have in your organization, that may or may not be a very expeditious way to go about it. You may end up, if you have hundreds of users, you may end up with many, many pages of search results to page through. But that is an option if you want to try it. And then you'll click your search button. And if you're viewing a list, it'll look like this, and then you'll just click on the link of the user that you want to update or maintain. If it's a unique name, again, it'll take you directly to the user profile screen, which looks like this. Now, hopefully this screen looks familiar because this is exactly the same screen we were looking at when we finished setting up step 1 of our new user. So this is basically the user profile page for ongoing maintenance as well. There's a few different areas that you can edit or maintain. All of this information towards the top, such as their access status or functional entitlement group or anything like that, is under this login and approval section and can be maintained using the edit link here. So we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios of common reasons to maintain a user and talk a little bit about how the process works. So this is Frank, and Frank is going to be leaving the organization. So we want to remove his user profile so that he can no longer log in to Access Online. So we have his user profile pulled up here, and we're going to click Edit next to this Login and Approval section at the top. And then you're going to see the User Access Status drop down here at the top, and he will be showing as active. Now, these little eye icons throughout the system, anytime you click on these, it's going to show you a little pop-up with additional information about that data field. And in this instance, it is the different statuses that are available. So I'm not going to go through each of these. Most of them are self-explanatory, but I do want to clarify there is an admin locked option, which is a temporary removal of a user. So let's say that you wanted to disable someone's access to the system while they're on a leave of absence or working on an alternate job assignment. You can set them to admin locked and they will not be able to log in. And then when they return, you can set them back to active. If someone is leaving the organization, as in Frank's case, and we want to permanently remove their user profile, then we will select removed. So from this drop-down, we'll select removed, and then we'll scroll to the bottom of the user profile page and hit save. And then you'll see the success message at the top, and you'll see that his access status now shows as removed. And this happens in real time. One thing to keep in mind with removing a user is that if you were to search for him again, or you were to run a user profile report, he will continue to show up on your report for about 90 days, but he'll show up with that removed status noted. So if you run a report after you've removed someone and you still see them, don't panic, because it does take about 90 days for them to fall out of the system after they have been removed. Any questions on removing a user? Feel free to put them in the Q&A. All right, let's look at another example. So this is Luis, and Luis is calling you because he has been locked out of the system because he put in his password incorrectly 3 times. And we need to unlock his user ID. So we'll need to go into his user profile and change his access status from locked back to active so that he can log in again. So we would pull his user profile up, and we would see that his access status is set to failed password. And we would click our edit link here next to login and approvals. And then on the user access status dropdown, he'll show as failed password. We would want to click on active to set him back to active. Now, anytime you set someone back to an active, whether it's from, password failed or admin locked or expired, any of these other statuses except for removed, you will also need to re-enter that one-time use password. And you can, again, use the same one for everyone because they're asked to immediately set their own password when they log in using this common or one-time use password. Also, you can use this checkbox below the password field to have the system email those login credentials to Luis so that he doesn't have to, or so that you don't have to send that as a separate email. So it just saves you an additional task. So again, you'll scroll to the bottom and you'll click Save, and you'll get the success message, and then you'll see now that his user access status is set back to active. The system has sent him an email, and he should be able to log in and reset his own personal password and continue on with his life. So let's look at one more example. This is Ria, and she is moving from one team to another. She's a manager, and she needs to see her new cardholders in her new department, and then she no longer needs to see her previous department's cardholders. So we're going to update her hierarchy visibility. So we would pull up her user profile and scroll down the page to the hierarchy assignments. And again, if you're using both hierarchies, you would need to perform this under both links, but we're just going to show you an example using the processing hierarchy because they both work the same way. So you would click View Add Processing Hierarchy. You would again see your search page. If she is a department manager and that's the same level as your managing account, then level 5 will suffice for your search. If it's a higher level, you can use this drop-down to go to a higher hierarchy level and click Search. In the same manner as when we originally assigned the hierarchies for Ria, you'll see the search results here, and you'll see she's already got a hierarchy over here that is selected. So we would click the checkbox here next to the old selected hierarchy and click the Remove Position button to take that visibility of her old department's hierarchy away. And then you would check the new hierarchy over here from the list and click Select Position to bring her new hierarchy over here as a selected hierarchy. So it's kind of a dual function. So you're taking away the old hierarchy and then you're adding the new one. And as always, when you're changing hierarchy assignments, you'll click the Accept Hierarchy button here at the bottom of the screen. And then you'll see your success message. And to see the new hierarchy, you would scroll down this page and click that View or Add Hierarchy Assignments link again to see the hierarchy that you've just changed. So any questions on updating or maintaining a user profile? If there's any other common things that you can think of that you may need to do with user profiles and you're not sure how to do it, feel free to put those in the Q&A, and I'll wait just a moment to see if there's any questions. Okay. Hopefully you guys are with me and getting this, because it's been pretty quiet out there, which I understand we did that because of the mute. So if everybody's tracking with me, feel free to give me a thumbs up or a yes in the Q&A. And again, if there's any questions at all, please put those in. I'll be glad to answer them. Okay, now let's talk about user profile reports. So we do have some reports that can help you with managing your system users. And if you go under Reporting here on the main menu, and then you go under Administration, you will find the User Management Report templates. And you have two options here. You have the System User List, which is just kind of your basic version of the report. And then if you had account assignments that you wanted to view for those system users, you can use the detailed version, which is this second link. And it would give you an overview. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like I have a couple of questions here that I missed. Let me go back. Let's see. John says, our agency has a number of administrative and program assistants that would be pulling statements for multiple cardholders but not performing any approval functions. Is there a way to skip the approval part? Yes, John, when you're setting up that user, if they're not going to be doing any approval functions, you would just leave all of those selections unchecked and save their user profile without approval selections checked. And hopefully that will answer your question. Pamela says, when the user gets the original email, can they change the username? They cannot. You will be creating that username for them, and that will be their user ID for the duration, unless you were to go and set up a new user profile for them with a different user ID. Terry says, going back to confirm, if someone has multiple cards, such as a P card and a travel card, will they need to maintain separate logins for each card? Terry, they will not. Now, when they register they'll be registering with their card, so they'll need to use the account assignments to add the other card to their user profile so that they can see both cards within one login. So you can either do that for them by going in and adding the account on their user profile, or they can go to the My Personal Information section and there's a Manage Account Access link, and they would be able to add that account themselves. Bryant asks, where do we get the temporary password for the reset? Bryant, that is a one-time use password that you will need to create. You can, there's one that I kind of made up that's easy to remember that you're welcome to use. I'll retype it here. But you can basically make up any temporary password that involves at least 12 characters, a capital letter, lowercase, and a numeric. And let's see. I'm going to flip over here to see some additional questions. Kay asks, once a user is removed, can PA still access the user's transaction details? Yes. Okay, you can. The user profile removal that we did for Frank, that was only to remove his access to getting into the system. Now, if it is a card holder and you're removing their user access, you would also need to cancel their account, but the transactions that have already happened with that account will still show in the system. And when we talk next week about setting up and maintaining card holders, we'll show you how to close an account as well. And then Brenda asks, so if a card holder leaves, you need to remove their user access as well as close their card. Yes, Brenda, you're correct on that. Okay, Terry says, going back to confirm if someone has multiple cards. Oh, we answered that question already. Let's see. Wendy asks, I have a setup question. Can the cardholder pick their approval to default in their profile, or is this something the PA has to set up for each cardholder? Wendy, that is a great question. So cardholders can go into their own user profile once they have registered and logged in under the My Personal Information section. And there they will be able to set up their default approver. Also, too, they can select their approvers when they're actually approving their own transactions to go to the next level. And when they select an approver initially, that approver will kind of show up as the default until it's changed. And you'll see a little bit more about that tomorrow when we go into the transaction management class. Okay, let me see. I've actually got 2 Q&As here, so I'm trying to bounce back and forth to make sure we can see them all. Let's see, Amber says, that looked fairly easy to move a person from one hierarchy department to another. Is it really as easy as adding and removing? Yes, Amber, it is. It really is that easy. Carla asks, have you already gone over how to order new cards? No, we have not. Carla, that will be addressed in the card setup and maintenance class, which is on the 27th. And let's see, there's also a question here. Does the temp password have a time limit? Does the cardholder have a limited time when we reset their password? Not that I'm aware of. When you have emailed them those credentials, as far as I know, they have however long that they need to reset their own password. I would recommend doing it same day. It is possible that there's a timeout for that. I'm not aware of it. So I don't think that there is a limit. Let's see, Martha asks, is there a way to turn off all cards when we get to the year-end process and turn them back on, like setting their limits to $1 in a bulk process? Yes, Martha, there is a way to do that. And we will talk about that further next Tuesday on the 27th when we get into cardholder setup and maintenance. Terry asks, when a cardholder registers and sets up their profile, are any of the fields locked down so there is default information or so that it can't be used? Terry, the only information field that is locked down is that user profile, the user ID name. So that one is locked down. They do have the ability to edit other things. So you might want to provide some guidance there for the cardholders when they're doing that self-registration process. Okay, I think we're caught up on questions. So let's go ahead and go back to talking about reports. Again, the system user list is kind of the basic version of your system users. It would show their names and statuses, things of that nature. And the system user list with details will show any accounts that are assigned to that user. Now, at the bottom of the page, regarding that cardholder online registration process, if they enter their card number or their expiration date incorrectly a couple of times, they will get locked out for security purposes. So this locked accounts link will show you a report of any of the accounts that are in that locked status. And then this online registration link will give you the ability to unlock that process for the cardholder registration only. Okay, let's see. Does the one-time use password for reset need to be the same one you originally used setting up the user? Um, it should be, yes. You can create one-time use passwords for each individual user if you want to, or a new one each time. But we do recommend using the same one every time because it's not a security risk, and because if something were to go amiss, that password is not easily reset, the one-time use password. So we, do recommend picking a password that you like and sticking with that. Good question. And finally, here's an example of what the system user list with detail looks like. So it would show you the user ID, their name, email address, their status, whether or not they're an approver, their functional entitlement group, the description, if it is listed. I'm not sure why it says do not change there. That might be just a default from the system. And then it would show any accounts that are assigned as well to that user. Okay, so the other thing we want to talk about today is a point of contact. We looked yesterday in our Getting Started class at how to find a point of contact, but now we want to show you how to set one up. So you would go again to System Administration, and instead of User Profiles, you would come down to Create a Point of Contact. Now there's also an Edit Point of Contact, and it would be a common point of confusion if you said the point of contact for a particular part of the hierarchy is going to change from one person to another. And the edit link is basically just to edit information for an existing point of contact. And point of contact in the system is basically just you will go in and identify yourself as the point of contact because you are the administrator. And this does two things. If there's anyone in your organization who doesn't know you as the administrator, they will be able to find you using this third link, Find Point of Contact, in case they need assistance. And also, setting up yourself as the point of contact for your hierarchy or organization will allow customer service to very quickly validate you as the point of contact for this hierarchy or organization so that you can receive information from customer service or from the technical help desk about your accounts within the system. So that is why we recommend setting up yourself as a point of contact. So to create your point of contact, you'll click on that link there, and you'll select the role. Now, Amber just asked, will we have the ability to set up multiple points of contact? And yes, you can. For yourself, if you are the primary administrator, you'll select PA, and then for any other points of contact, you'll set them up as alternate PA. You can only have one primary for each part of your hierarchy, but you can have multiple alternates. I think it's up to 25 alternate points of contact. So you'll select the role, and then you'll enter your contact information, and then you'll need to designate the processing and or reporting hierarchy that you are going to be the point of contact for. And again, we do recommend that you add them both unless you have been specifically directed to use one or the other. So the hierarchy search in this part of the system looks a little bit different. The level will not be selected for you. You can choose levels 1 through 5. 6 and 7 are not typically used, so you can disregard those. So you would select your hierarchy level. I would recommend level 5 unless you're part of a larger part of the organization above the managing account level. And then click your search button, and your hierarchy search results will look like this. So this is a newer part of the system. That's why the screens look a little bit different. But the functionality works the same way. Again, you'll see all these bank, agent, and company numbers. And then if you want to see your terminology that you're familiar with as your organization is set up, you can click the Show or Hide All Hierarchy Names link, and that will show you the details with which you're familiar. And then you'll use your checkbox to select and then click confirm. And again, you'll do that for both the processing and reporting hierarchies unless you've been directed otherwise. And then you'll have a chance to review the information that you've just entered and to submit it. And again, once you've set up yourself as a point of contact, and then you can set up others as alternates, that will allow anyone in the system to go in and find you as the point of contact so that you can receive information from customer service or technical help desk, or so that someone in your organization can find you for assistance if they need it. And Brenda asks, just to clarify, cardholders can set up their own user IDs as they register. Correct, PAs do not need to do that for them, especially as it can't be changed. We are only setting up user IDs for PAs, etc. Brenda, you are correct, yes. Cardholders will be setting up their own user ID when they do that card registration process that we just looked at. She says, phew. That does make life a little easier, doesn't it? All right, so if you wanted to find a point of contact, let's say that you wanted to contact an administrator for another part of your organization, or if someone is going in and trying to find you as the point of contact, once they click this link, they'll see a search page. They could just leave all this information blank and hit search and see a full list of points of contact for the organization. They also have this show hide search criteria where you can designate some additional search criteria here. That's optional. And then here's what the search results look like. So then you would click on the little radio button next to that point of contact and click confirm, and then you'll see that point of contact information. And just a quick note, we do have a report that will show you all the points of contact for your organization, and you can find that by going under reporting, and then program management, and then the point of contact details report. So any last questions on points of contact? I know we're getting to the top of the hour here. Okay, before we finish up, I want to just mention our training site in case anyone has not yet had a chance to see that. This is going to be an incredible resource for you. So if you click the training link, you'll see the web-based training site. It does open in a new window, and each of these topic bars will expand to have different topics within each section. And also you can find the content that you need very quickly by using this search feature, which is newer, and we're quite proud of it and very excited about it because it makes all of this information much easier to work with if you can find directly what you need. So you can just enter a keyword here. Like let's say that you need to look up a decline transaction and you don't remember how to do that. So you can type in the word decline here and hit search, and then you'll see a list of resources appear below the search box, such as a quick reference or a video, and then you can click that and quickly get refreshed on how to find a decline transaction. So any keyword searches here will help you find the information and the resources you need. Once you've expanded one of the topic sections, it looks like this, and there's multiple resources within. There's lessons, which are sort of like an interactive PowerPoint where you can be walked through how to do a task. There's user guides, which are detailed instruction manuals by task or topic. Then we also have short videos that you can watch a trainer going through the system, and have audio narration that will allow you to follow along. Quick reference guides, which are kind of an abbreviated 1 to 2 page overview. They're just a shorter version than the user guide if you maybe have done a task before and you just need a refresher. We also have recorded classes. These are for our government and commercial clients. You all will have your own set of recorded classes from the custom training that we're providing for you. And then there's also certification questions that you can use optionally to go along with the lessons if you wanted someone to take a lesson and then take a little quiz after completing that lesson. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and move to final questions. Brenda says, are the 2 slide decks from yesterday here? They are not on the web-based training site, no. We are giving that information to, I believe it's Rick, and he will be adding it to your OSC site. So the classes from yesterday, the recordings and the presentations will be added to that site very soon. I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is on that, but that information should be available pretty quickly. And then Wendy says, can non-card holders self-register? I have several approvers that do not have cards. Is there a link that they can go to set themselves up? Wendy, we do not have that feature available. That is a great suggestion, though, and I'm going to write that down and pass it along for our enhancements wish list. So that's a great suggestion, but yeah, you will have to set up the approvers with their user profile. Okay, I realize we're a couple of minutes over time. I'll hang around for another minute or two in case there's additional questions. But other than that, that does bring our session today to a close. So we thank you so much for joining today, and I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.